All right. Thank you, Yuchen. I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Celine and Sarah, for making this happen. I am in the future for 11 hours, but I'm also in the past. The reason why I hesitated when Celine asked me where am I from originally is because that I feel a strong sense of overlapping of identity. Every time that I travel back and forth, the initial week is cognitively very difficult. Yesterday, I met with a friend who organized the art book fair in Beijing and Shanghai. We've known each other for 10 years when we were students, and her first fair was just a table, and now they are the biggest fair in mainland China. And talking to her made me realize that how ignorant I am about the independent publishing scene in the Sinophone world. I started making books in Chicago, and then I went to New York to work for Print and Matter for 7 years. My literacy of artist book established entirely based on the history of conceptual art in the East Coast of the US of the 60s and 70s, and I had no knowledge of the non-Western, which is the 99% of the practice. And I feel that it's also a little bit strange for me to speak of this history, which, by the way, I do for a living in the past few years, yet without knowing, quote unquote, the original or where I originally come from. So it is from this multiple sense of displacement that I'm speaking to you today. But I think maybe that is the only place I can speak from. I also start to realize maybe I made some mistakes about the planning of this presentation, because I've been doing a lot of classes and lectures, and I always start with the history of artist books, which now looking at the screen, I realize everyone is probably more familiar and has more experience, more knowledgeable about the history than I am. So I'm going to make that part really, really brief, and to have more time to talk about my own books and hopefully conversation towards the end. Yes, I will start then. I will have to ask you to bear with me. But I also do think that there are ways to look at history with renewed eyes. Even though I've been talking about this for, I think, 7-8 years, I do feel like I see new things and hear new things. And I've been having more and more suspicion about this history as well. I no longer believe that a practice such as artist books was started by one person, as Wikipedia states. That is William Blake. I also start to realize 26 Gasoline Station, even though it has been celebrated as such a seminal practice, it's banal and secular gaze. And I used to work for Print and Matter. We have a shelf of books that pays homage to 26 Gasoline Station. They are all, I call them certain number of certain things. It took me many years to understand what's so cool about this methodology, because as you can see, the design is very generic and the content is nothing more than the title describes. There's almost nothing in these books. But it is actually, last year, I took a workshop with a friend about haiku, and that helped me understood Edouché in the way that both haiku and Edouché are boring, that it both radically use boredom as a tool. Because we know books, we grew up with books, we have them in our pocket, by the pillows, we expect knowledge, stories, organized information from books. But 26 Gasoline Stations really doesn't deliver any of these promises. But I think it is when it doesn't work as a book that it start to work as an artist book, perhaps, because in the momentary confusion and letdown, we start to wonder, what is this? What is a book and what is knowledge? And famously, he was rejected by Congress Library, and he purchased a little space on Art Forum to announce the rejection. Also as an advertisement saying that you can buy it from me for $3 a copy. I believe she printed 1,500 copies to start with and reprinted them as they were selling out to prevent them from becoming precious. And this is something that I still find inspiring, that it's distribution. He was already quite successful as a painter at the time. And we know how paintings circulate. They are millions and billions, and they are for a very particular demographic. But he wanted his artist book to be a separate line, circulates in a wildly different demographic. And instead of going to a very often prestigious institution and the physical space, we take this with us in our pocket, and we can open it in the park, by breakfast table, or as you do in the library. I think this sense of intimacy and directness and unpretentiousness is something still attracts me. I read an interview by him on this magazine called Avalanche. The interview is titled "A Kind of Huh?" ? And I think that is precisely what's inspiring to me. I also read this art historian, what's his name? I will find it later. He was doing a research at the New York Public Library, and he found 26 gasoline stations not in art, not in photography, but in transportation. And initially he thought it was funny, this librarian must not know what is artist books or self-publishing. But later he realized that this is actually an index of its radicality, that it has no place. It doesn't exist. It doesn't fit the current categorization of things. And I think Printed Matter, this organization that I worked for 7 years, where I really learned to read art, is a space that's elbowed out by these very strange objects. And amongst his collection of what I call certain number of certain things, that my favorite is nice swimming pools. I used to be in charge of the Instagram of Printed Matter, so I have a large database of photos in my hand because I had to post them and write synopses for them. But I think the nice swimming pools, I guess because they are truly boring, this backyard of middle-class household, that you start to see blue. It becomes a book of different shades of blue, and strangely, and a broken glass. And I think another approach to artist books that has been influential to me is people who work with time, events happening, theater of chance. Similar to Ed Ruscha, who doesn't want his artwork to circulate only in the market of luxury commodities. This group of artists want their artwork to be events instead of objects that's harder to be fetishized or owned or traded. And then make a book. I guess making a book at a time is the best way to, on the one hand, document what they've done, on the other hand, distribute it further. To make an event distributable through book form. And this is Yoko Ono, famously, a book of instructions. Walking in the footsteps of the person in front, 1 on ground, 2 in mud, 3 in snow, 4 on ice, 5 in water. Try not to make sounds. 1964 spring. I think what's really beautiful about this book is that performance or events or theater, they're already intangible. Yet in this book, even performance is dematerialized because you don't even need to perform it. You can simply imagine the experience. And I think this mechanism of imagination is how I understand conceptual art. The real work is the imagination that it triggers, that it projects. In this case, by means of very simple text on white sheet of paper. And this is another book made around this time by a very intimate collaborator of Yoko Ono, Alan Capro, and this is a calendar, which is still something I see a lot of artists do, and sometimes me too, that is to make a book pretend to be a traditional genre of publication, be that a calendar, a recipe book, or a romance novel, but then secretly subvert the tradition. For example, this one, it is a calendar, but not of meetings or of classes. It's a calendar of days off and of leisure. For example, October 12th, the event is to build a wall with ice. Their walls are unbroken, they are left to melt. November 28th, moving. And another artist I guess I have to mention here is Solowit. I'm sure you're all very familiar with him. I did a residency at Mass MoCA 3 years ago, and was exposed to a huge number of Solowit's pieces. And I had this strong hallucination that I was walking in books because I saw his books first. Because he started Printed Matter, we have a large collection of his books. And I did read that he was very articulate. He articulated as every page a wall, every spread a room. He did treat them in a very similar view. And he famously didn't make them. He made the instruction. For him, I guess the democratic ideal is expressed in a way that he wanted more hands. Instead of one genius, one hand, he welcomed variation. And this concept of variation is very present in his book as well. He didn't make the image. What he made is a system, and he turned it on. He ran the system. Sometimes it's a mathematical system, sometimes a geometric, sometimes a linguistic system. He runs it and he shows every permutation. He shows the variation as if they're equally beautiful and important. He doesn't choose. This is for basic colors and lines and their combinations. 4-color, yellow, black, red, blue. 4 lines, vertical, horizontal, diagonal this way, diagonal that way. And this is the whole book. And I read this from interview of Lucy Lepard. He was very serious about his books. As you can see, his obsession, I may say that it's very, it's intrinsically, it's calling for a book. It needs to be a book. He was very dedicated to book form and made many books, but I quote Lucy Lepard, his galleries didn't take them seriously, use them as bait to draw in the collectors to buy the big stuff. And he was very frustrated and started his own alternative distributive network, which is Printed Matter. Originally, Printed Matter didn't have any selection policies. Anyone can bring their book to sell, which I think is coherent to how he treats image. They are equally beautiful and important. Although this is no longer true, there is a submission process right now. But I think, I guess I feel after 7 years of retail experience, I start to see some really beautiful irony in this organization. For example, all of Lucy Lepard's writing is about dematerialization and decommodification, yet a book is more material. Instead of one image, it's 20. Instead of one authentic piece with aura, a book has 2,000 copies. There's more pile, there's more hoarding. But I do think it's actually in this in large quantity that the thingness is diluted, that each one of them is less precious, at least less expensive. And even though decommodification is such a drive for artists to make books, but printed matter is a bookstore, and we talk about sales every day, because unlike many institutions that has money, we need money through retail. And it is actually through this retail that part of the democratic ideal is realized, because it's no longer in a specialized market. It wants to participate in the everyday economy. I believe Ed Ruscha tried to sell his books at the gasoline stations instead of having them in, the art market of Chelsea. Although much of this is no longer true. Last time I saw a 26 gasoline station, it was 3,600, I believe. Although it is still much less than a painting, but it's no longer how much he intended. This is a diagram by Clive Philpott. I'm sure many of you might have seen this. He was a director of printed matter, and later he started the MoMA database, which might be one of the earliest institutions that collect artist book. But this is his view. If art is apple, pear is books, lemon is book art, and there's unique and multiple. For example, some books are more like poetries or manifestos or artist novels. They look more like literary books. Sometimes a book is very exquisite. It opens up to a carved house or forest. That would be more like an object. There's unique, there's multiple. They can all be artist books, but he favored multiple more than unique. It was at his time that printed matter's policy became that we only take books of edition number more than 100. Not that it can sell 100, but ideologically, we're more interested in the books that's aimed at a more accessible distribution. However, I saw this diagram a few years ago, and I thought it was a very exciting and necessary update. This is made by Half Letter Press. It's a very cool zine press in Chicago. And so there's unique, there's multiple, but now we have digital. Now we have PDF and ebooks. What does that mean in terms of a more accessible distribution? Maybe Ed Ruscha didn't need to make a book if it had the Instagram. Or actually, I've seen a lot of Instagram accounts are managed in the methodology of Ed Ruscha, that they are certain number of certain things. They keep looking for the same thing and making each post or a page a variation of that thing. I also really like ISBN as a fruit tag. A tag that turns the fruit of the earth into a commodity, which I believe for Half Letter it was a critique, but where I am right now, it is actually a much more complicated problem, because in China, it is extremely difficult to get ISBN, and it is extremely dangerous to circulate book without ISBN. But I really think it is doable. I've seen ridiculous books in America that has ISBN and can circulate in a very legit network. I guess I say this to say that I truly feel it now, that this discourse of self-publishing carries very different weight in different cultural and political climate. And this is how I see the art of it right now. I think this is David Hammond selling snowballs in the 80s in the Chinatown of New York. Next to him, there are Chinese traders selling tomatoes, oranges. And I see myself in book fairs as a variation of David Hammond's, that I'm really selling something imaginary. Its value totally made up. Yet it is through this act of buying and selling, ironically, through the commodification of my snowballs, that I get to pass on a value system to. This is the last slide of this photo collections, and I will spend some time now to show you some of my books. I guess I will try to do them chronologically. This is my friend's beautiful studio, and she happens to have a collection of my book because I always bring her some every time I come back. And I also have a couple, but what she has, this one, we have Chinese and English 2 versions. What she has is the Mandarin version. This means book. This was Myang Ga Hong, my teacher in Chicago, and this is me. And this is, I guess, my first publication after school. It is an instructional book on bookbinding, organized from my notes when I was a TA in Art Institute of Chicago. Because even though I was a TA, I really didn't know how to bind anything. So I had to take notes very, very quickly in form of drawing. And then we spent 4 years organizing these drawings into this book, which has been a all-time bestseller of many bookstores, and we are now printing the 5th editions. However, because of the intensifying environment I was describing, we now need to get them ISBN in both US and China now. So its distribution will change. I don't know in what way yet, but in the past, it was purely organic. I carry them in my luggage and I take them to bookstores in my backpack. I have been a mule or a smuggler for many years, but now it's proven more and more difficult. So I made this, initially I started to teach workshop as a promotional event for this book, but later I really started teaching more and more regularly thanks to this book. My teacher also designed this. I guess all of you should be familiar with what is this trying to be, a cradle with cardboard. We cut this in a factory in Hangzhou. This is a 2nd edition of a book that I made also in Chicago. And I guess it is also a scenario I'm sure many of you are familiar with. That is, I always have a lot of paper of this shape because they're just offcuts. Especially when I teach, there are just piles and piles of them. And I just couldn't let them go. And I started drawing on them. This is a book of 20 imaginary snakes drawn on this very narrow paper. And the first edition I made in school, I think I made 100 copies by hand, perfect bound. Although I suspect they are not all loose cards. I don't know if they're still books. The 2nd edition, I think I sold out them many years ago, but I just made the 2nd edition lately in a factory in Shanghai, and that it won't be read many times. So it's also, it doesn't have to be that reliable. People have bought this for many different reasons. I guess that's a benefit of book fair. You get to see them directly and they tell you why they like it. One of them says, I'm always afraid of snakes. I think this will help me. The other said that my friend's snake just died. I think I'll buy this book for them. This book, by the way, is right now priced 34, which is my age. Next year, it will be 35. And when they first came out, it was 24, because I was 24 then. I guess in a way, I'm trying to encourage people to buy it sooner. Although one visitor at the book fair told me that with inflation, 35 next year is cheaper than 34 this year, which is very depressing thought. This is a book I made actually as part of the workshop that I took with friend on Zoom during the pandemic on haiku. I guess I never used the word poetry before. I find it very intimidating, but it was in this workshop that I got to learn that poetry is how we participate in language. And they gave us many prompts and we wrote accordingly. And this book contains three poems that I wrote and another sheet of paper that I'll show you later. Each one of them opens up to a letter, and they were written and then scanned. I'll read this one. Implicit, explicit. I haven't been able to remember which one means obvious, which one doesn't. Yet I got by conversations. When one or both of them appeared, I just pay attention to the rest of the sentence or the tone of the speaker or what I know of this person. One recent evening on a rooftop, sunset purple and orange, I was tempted to gamble. When a friend asked about my injured wrist, I said it's not implicit pain. And I waited for my words to land. My friend smiled, kind and entertained. Now he knows my pain and the fact that I enjoy his company. I smile too, knowing that I have put two words in my pocket. So the reason why I read it is that the idea of pocket kind of informed the structure that are for pocket. And if you open it up, it has the information of the workshop and who hosted. Initially, I wanted this to be a gift for everyone who participated. So I printed everything on one sheet of paper and just folded into an accordion. But I couldn't bring myself to the post office for months. And later I realized because I'm very self-conscious about my writing and I feel very embarrassed. And I need more protection. So this pocket in a way also functions as a protection. And afterwards, everything is folded inwardly so you can't see anything. In a way also as a technique of delaying, because at book fairs, this person in front of me will not be able to read it unless they're very serious about reading it. And the last pocket holds a piece of paper that is my name. I use my name as Louis Vuitton and made my own wrapping paper. I wrap all my books with this. And a drawing. This is, I've been working on a language with chorals that I collected during a residency in Malaysia. And in my language, this means poetry. So this is also included. And the front cover says poetry is three P's. Its shape in Mandarin, its sound in Mandarin, and its meaning, poetry is three P's. On the back of it is my name. This is when I realized many of my friends that I made in the US, very, very close friends, do not know the full dimensions of my name. They only know the sound, that is Chang Yuchen, but they also have shape and they also have meaning. So in essence, I think of this as a poem that my mom wrote. So it's a collection of poetry. And about the choral language I've been making, I can show you more words because now I have a dictionary. For example, this means me, this is you. They're the same chorus, but the me is at the bottom of a page because the bottom is closer to the one who reads and writes. You is the opposite, so they're interchangeable, depends on who's speaking. This is a door or hobby. It is a heart with many holes, so the thing or the individual you adore can come in. And this is poverty. Poverty is hollow. It's a form of lack. And this is arrest or bundle. So it's a trap closing in. This is study. Study is generative and expansive. This is colonizer. Colonizer is someone, well, the root of this word in Malay is traveler. So it's a traveler that comes from afar, but it lingers and doesn't go away. And this is to ask. It's a bit like a question mark, also like a year. So this dictionary contains 216 words that I translated from 2019 to 2022. But because this is an ongoing project, initially I made it into an accordion, because with accordion you can always add on more pages. So this version is more faithful to the original version that I made for myself, which is a very, very long accordion. However, the problem with accordion is that it's too hard to find the page you're looking for, because it is actually a toolbook for me as I'm still developing this language. So we decided that we need to also make a paperback version. And with the page number and the index, I guess, in the terms of information science, a cross-referencing system. And towards the end, I categorize them into 14 categories, including quality, intangible objects, tangible objects, functional words. I guess proposition is also a functional word, but I really like proposition and I have a lot, so it has its own category. Mobility, somatic, and so on. I looked at how Aristotle categorized things and I find it to be quite capricious. So I indulged myself to make my own. And accordion version ended up costing a lot of labor. So we priced it $500 a copy, and this one $58. The idea is that the rich people will pay more to support this, the cost of this paperback version. And I am hoping that in a few years, maybe 3, I can have a second edition. Since the publishing of this dictionary, I've had some occasions that I opened them up differently with other people. For example, in a performance, since accordion is so long, I had 5 people reading it at the same time, passing through it. So everyone is reading different page. And also it has 3 lines. One is Malay, one is English, one is Mandarin. I have friends speaking different languages, reading different lines at the same time. And it turned out to be a really beautiful polyphony. And one cannot help but feeling connections between the randomly chosen words of 4 people. So you start to making up the connections as if there are compositions. The reason why there's 3 scripts is not because I happen to also speak English and Mandarin and the project started in Malay, but in fact, I guess the diversified linguistic environment or ecology in Malaysia was a very important motivation for this project, because Malay never had its own script. It was spelled with Arabic during the Islamization and with Roman letters during British colonization. From where I come from, where the sound, shape, and meaning of every word have always been intact, it was quite shocking that a language doesn't have its own script. But it was after living there, learning, making friends, I start to see it's actually really cool to not have a body, and they can use anybody. They're a free ghost, a post-body language. And no matter what language was imposed on them or what they have to learn in school, they always have a secret, intangible tongue. So it was actually encouraged by this looseness, this flexibility, instead of authenticity or correctness with language, that I start to make my own. And I've also made books for other people. For example, this one I've been teaching, strangely, a dance MFA. I don't know what they want from me, but I've been teaching this program in Philly for 3 years now. Every summer, every semester I go to Philly once a week, and every summer we all go to this institution in South France, in Montpellier, to have a conference on body dance performance, and then a class that I co-teach with artists I really, really admire, Camila. And this is a book, I was commissioned to make a book about a symposium, which had many very, very amazing and I guess famous too scholars presenting their studies on dance, anthropology related to dance, and so on. However, after the curator of the symposium introduced me to those scholars, nobody emailed me back. I waited for a few months, and I wonder, maybe, you know, they publish with Duke University Press, they just don't know how to engage with me to publish as a publisher. So I decided to print my own notes, because I happen to keep a lot of notes. Actually, I have 30 pages of notes, and I decided to use this book to document not what they've said, but what I heard or what lingered and resonated with me. I picked some phrases and words that particularly caught my attention on this page. And that's the whole book. So they are all loose sheets, and the body of the book is just staple bound. And the cover of it, so I scanned this whole chunk on my notebook, and the cover is my diary on my way to Montpellier. I was just on this train from Paris to Montpellier for the first time, and I was very sleepy on the train because of jet lag. By the moment I woke up, I understood Impressionism. I realized that it's actually a local realism, because at sunset, the mountain is actually pink, orange on the bright side, purple, blue in the shade side, which is a color palette that I had to remember as like hard memory when I was a student learning art, because that's what we're supposed to paint. However, my mountain doesn't look like that. For me, it was a wholly alienated and memorization. Yet in Montpellier, I realized that what they wanted to capture was truly their visual experience. It's not a abstract knowledge. Another book that I made, actually this was commissioned by Center for Book Arts, who have this program that they ask poets to submit their manuscript, and the person who win, the poets who win will be, they will pay an artist to make a book for them. And I was paired with this poet, Bianca Ray Messenger, whose poetry contains 4 chapters. And the first 3 chapters is on one sheet of paper. And the 4th one opens up like this. I have to. Because when I read her poetry, I realized that her poetry involves a lot of air. She writes in a very dispersed and almost geographical way. And I wanted to also include air in the binding to echo the airiness of her book. I guess in the end, I made it into a kite or a ladder. It was just a little hard to admin. It's very simple. I just use a needle to go through every page in and out. I didn't even pierce anything beforehand. It's simple, yet the problem is that it can be speeded up. It's simple and long, and we made 100 copies of it. The last book I want to show you, I guess I need to adjust this a little bit. This is a book that wants to be a loom and invites reader to weave. So I was reading a book on archaic weaving devices from all over the world. Initially, I made these drawings as notes, trying to understand how the loom works. These are little rocks that help to weigh the yarn down, because all you need really is tension for the warp or weft to have tension, so you can weave the horizontal one. But I didn't want to make a book about loom. I wanted to make a book that is a loom. So I made drawings and the captions on opposite pamphlets to invite the reader's hand to dance in a way that weavers do. Although at a book fair, someone pointed out to me that this is not weaving, but unraveling. It is after we read that we weave it back together. But it has been very nice to collaborate with visitors in the book fair. It works better with 4 hands instead of 2. This is the waist loom. In the end, it becomes 2. And this is the book I was reading where I learned all these different types of looms. Yes. Lastly, I recently made a calendar using 12 words, 12 chorus. I guess it is my attempt to free myself from the number system that we live by, although I still have months on them. So January is beginning, just emerging. February is to ask, to raise question. March, becoming aware. April is to exist. May is love, which is a word we already looked at in the dictionary. June is to enter. July is to go, like leave. And August is the opposite bank, the other side of a river. September, study, which we also saw on the dictionary. October, free, liberation. Liberation is to stretch, to take up the space. November is tired. Tired is like you want to lie down, but you can't. You're just leaning. And December is to look after. Look after just has an eye. It's awake. It's the one who's awake, to look after the one who's tired. So that concludes what I have in my computer and on my table. Thank you for your patience. That's a lot of me talking at you. And I would love to hear you talk now, if you like. You can also type, of course.
Thank you, Yuchen. That was amazing. I think my favorite of them all was the one about the dance instructors, or the documentation of the dance instructors. And I really like that idea of taking notes from their lectures and then pulling out the phrases that have meaning from that. I just think that's a fabulous idea. I mean, I kind of want to go back to notes that I have on anything and do something similar, because what a great way to document. This is what I heard and this is what has meaning. I'm wondering, have any of the people that you were taking the notes from, the lecturers, have they seen the book since?
I actually don't know, because I only kept several copies for myself and sent the rest to the school. And the next year is a different batch of scholar. But I thank you for what you just said. I also, a friend pointed out that actually the books of, say, Socrates or of Confucius, those were all notes taken by students. These philosophers didn't really write any of them themselves. So I think it's actually a really good strategy of counterfeit in a way. You know, I have ears, I can hear you.
Oh, that's very interesting, the connection to the historical form. I wasn't aware of that. I have a couple of random questions, and I haven't seen anything else. You mentioned, so this is completely different perspective. You mentioned several times that the ISBNs are really important, and I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more. Why are ISBNs so important, and are they important differently in the US than they are in China, or is it the same importance?
I don't think I mean, I don't want to think they're important. None of my books have ISBN. And in my long career as a retailer, most of the books we handle at Printed Matter also don't have ISBN. It is becoming important to me simply because right now in China, which is a audience base that I care about greatly, it's just becoming difficult to sell books here without ISBN. Book fairs and independent bookstores are being raided and censored on a regular basis. So this is a changing situation. So, and book sells a lot. So I think it's safer to have ISBN here. In the US, actually, I don't know if maybe many of you know about him, Paul Chen. He's an American artist. He really made publishing a form of art. He published an essay on democracy by Saddam Hussein. He came across that text, but didn't have enough lawyer when he was younger. And then he published it when he was older. He published Yvonne Rainer's poetry. Yvonne Rainer is a dancer, but after his publishing, her poetry is amongst other poets. He published poems because this French publisher in the 19th century who published like Samuel Beckett was very broke and had to publish porn to support their experimental literature. And Paul Chen was also very broke, but he believed that the porn actually was the experimental literature in our time. That series called New Lovers have ISBN. I think that shows how easy it is to get ISBN in the US. He also made a book on the stone, like a stone of as tall as I am. And on it, there's a short story called Holiday, and it has ISBN carved on it. And his idea is that most Moses publish on stone. So he wanted to publish on stone too. Yes, I think he has a lot of work that discuss publishing the act itself. Has been an inspiration for me too. But my concern with ISBN is more pragmatic.
So Kate asked if your book will be available again for purchase.
Very soon. We are going to print the 5th edition soon, and we will have ISBN. So it will be more available than ever before very soon.
Do you normally sell your books just on your website?
I just started to sell them on my website this past year. I usually have them in like Printed Matter or at book fairs. And occasionally in McNally Jackson. But I guess I've been quite local because I carried them to the bookstores in New York to consign them. But maybe next additional book at least will circulate further. For the rest, right now, I guess my website, I diligently update my website.
And then Michael asked about your shape of your books. He noticed it says many of your books are very long rectangles. Can you tell us how you think about and choose your shape for your books?
Right. That's a very interesting question. I guess I also observed that I wonder it has to do with how much I look at my phone. I recently read that a lot of abstract painters are making more scrollable paintings. I think it might have infected my visual preference too. But it could also just be a shape that I like. This is my friend's book that I was looking at just now. It's by a Japanese artist. Oh, not Japanese, Philippi Weizenbeck. And it's a book of tools. And they are kind of tall and narrow because they should be. It's the shape of the tools. In essence, it is a shape. I guess if we think of tools as extension of our arms or hand, it's kind of somatically sensible to have them rectangular.
That
But
makes
very
sense.
good question. Thank you.
Jade wonders if you'll be at Codex in February in Berkeley.
I don't think so.
Have you
But
ever gone to it?
No, I will look it up. I should mention that I just started to participate in book fairs as myself because I stopped working for Print and Matter in 2021. So before that, I always work for Print and Matter at book fairs. I've taken them to Shanghai, to Beijing, to Hong Kong, Taipei, Tokyo, also participating in other book fairs in New York. So I guess I quit a while ago. I still call Print and Matter as we or us as a matter of habit, but I just started to have my own table very recently. So I'm just learning the map of the book fairs right now.
I like the part you said about Instagram is sort of becoming like a modern form of a book, you know, where people are presenting on consistent things, and that it's, although it's not a true book, it functions like a book in our electronics. And I compared that to where you started off with your category of a certain number of a certain things, and then you showed us your first book was the 20 snakes, and I thought, well, there you are, a certain number of a certain things again. So it's a continuing theme in your observations on books.
Yes. I also came to realize, isn't there a 36 view of Fuji Mountain first?
Oh, right. Yes.
Perhaps Edward Shea actually took that idea there. It's very possible. He's very fascinated by Japanese culture, evidently. So
yeah, that would be a great question to ask him. If you could go in time. So my last question is on the choral dictionary, which I think is really interesting that you want to create a language. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about your inspiration. I mean, were you just looking at a beach full of choral pieces and you thought these are a language and it's up to me to write it down? Or was it because Malay doesn't have a written language? Or
maybe it would be easier if I show a couple more images of my studio right now. I'll just share my screen quickly. Well, this was in Malaysia. I left 7 sentences before I left. It started on the beach and I couldn't help but picking them up. They were just a mountain of dead coral fragments. I think amongst all the other reasons why corals are dying massively, local fishermen used to home make dynamite as a way of fishing, just blow up fish under the water. For all these reasons, there were just so many. So I picked up some every day during my month-long residency, and I couldn't help myself arranging them into several categories, and I started to translate them in form of drawing. And I made these sentences in form of drawing as well. All the words in the dictionary comes from these sentences. For example,
can you read read one for us?
Well, I guess it is mostly a written language.
Oh, okay.
The phonetic aspects of it can be Malay, can be English, can be Mandarin. For example, this one is face or surface. This one is a sea. This one is wave. But in Malay, say Alan means wave. Alan makes it plural. Or a buku is a book. Buku makes it books. And I find that repetition very economic and makes a lot of sense to me. So I draw a shadow to mimic the repetition and makes it plural. This is the beginning of a day, or AM, the upper half of a day. A day is a unit. So I have right now about 70 sentences. And from these sentences, I have growing words. I've showed them as drawings, also as, I guess, installations. Each one of them contains one sentence. Although these were actually made with clay, because real corals can be shipped. I guess a lot of my practice has to do with border, but this one can't cross border. So I just forged some words with paper mache. So yeah, this is where I am now. Right now, I'm still developing this language, so I need a dictionary to refer back. For example, when I translate the river, I need to see what I did with the sea. Or when I translate future, I want to see what I did with the past. So I'm actively using this dictionary on a daily basis. This is how I invited multiple friends to read it at the same time. Everyone has a mic. And this is when I was offered a very big, I guess, rather big space in New York to present my book, so that I opened my accordion entirely, which I've never done. I never seen it entirely stretched out. And I introduced every word from the first page, squatting and moving to the last page in the span of 40 minutes. And then I also have these words, which I haven't translated yet, and I invited audience to translate them. And I think it was very successful. In a way, I almost believe that we can have a dialect in an hour, because they understood me and I understood them. It made total sense to me why they think certain choral was certain meaning. So in essence, the publication of this dictionary had made this private language more open, that it can almost be used as a didactic or pedagogical tool if anyone wants to learn my language.
And do you think that it's informed by the fact that Chinese is the same, like you were saying, that your words have a form and a meaning inherent in them, and it's kind of the same with the choral?
Yeah, I think the resemblance is undeniable. They are absolutely influenced. That is how my brain is wired. Although I also think that now, whenever I see Egyptian hieroglyph, my heart is pounding, that I feel like I can understand them, even though I don't, but I can feel what they are trying to do.
Interesting. So here we are going back to the ancient again. Your book of observations was like the ancient philosophers, and your language is like the ancient Egyptians. So when you said at the beginning how you're in the future because you're in Wednesday, but you're also looking in the past, it informs your work quite a bit.
Yes.
Well, now that this has been fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I'm going to ask if anybody else has any other questions or something they want to see in closer detail. I'm going to turn off the spotlight here. It's somebody waving their hands. No questions. I don't see anything there. Well, I have really enjoyed this presentation. It's been fabulous, and I really appreciate you making time available for us and showing us all your work. It made so much more depth to it to have you explain it than when I was looking at the photos on your website, because I wasn't familiar with your work before Sarah said we needed to have you come talk to us. So thank you for going through those and explaining them. just the shapes. I like the weaving one. I gotta let people go. So, but the idea that you want a book about looms, but it involves weaving. It isn't just a story of looms. What a great idea. So inspiring.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think I'll call this a wrap, and I encourage you all to go to Yuchen's website, which we put on our announcement on the website, and I mean on the bag website, and then you can look at more of her work or look at them in more detail, and maybe one of these days we'll get her out to the West Coast or perhaps Codex, and we can go down and experiment. I love that piece where you did the room full of the choral pieces for people to translate. That was really a cool way to continue the interpretation process. So thank you for all those photos. It was wonderful, wonderful presentation. I'll just keep gushing until everybody signs off. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I hope we see you in person next month. So have a great rest of your January and good night. I forgot to turn off recording.